Hello and welcome back to another Monster Monday, a series where I draw a creature from D&D and I talk about its lore and its mythology and what it's like to fight in-game as well. For these videos I like to use your suggestions for which monsters you'd like to see, so if anything piques your interest or if there's a monster that you're dying to hear my interpretation of, see what I would come up with for a drawing, then make sure to leave that down below in the comment section and I'll add it to my to-draw list, which every month I hand to my patrons over on Patreon, who all get an equal chance to vote on which ones of your suggestions they'd like to see in what order. I'll make sure to leave a link to my Patreon page in my description box as well. If getting more control over the types of videos that you see from me and getting a chance to vote on these videos is something that you'd like to do. Also, your support really helps this channel, so thank you very much if you do check that out. Now today's suggestion is one that I've been really excited to cover ever since I first watched those fantastic Lord of the Rings movies. So I was really excited when Critch, a viewer who I checked out their channel and they are the self-professed stuttering hillbilly, suggested today's topic of the Balor. So thank you so much, Critch. Thank you so much for watching, and let's get started with today's video on the Balor. The Balrog reached the bridge. Gandalf stood in the middle of the span, leaning on the staff in his left hand, but in his other hand, Glamdring gleamed, cold and white. His enemy halted again, facing him, and the shadow about it reached out like two vast wings. It raised the whip, and the thongs whined and cracked. Fire came from its nostrils, but Gandalf stood firm. "You cannot pass," he said. The orc stood still, and a dead silence fell. "I am a servant of the sacred fire, wielder of the flame of Arnor. You cannot pass. The dark fire will not avail you, flame of Udun. Go back to the shadow! You cannot pass!" The Balrog made no answer. The fire in it seemed to die, but the darkness grew. It stepped forward slowly onto the bridge, and suddenly it drew itself up to a great height, and its wings were spread from wall to wall. But still Gandalf could be seen, glimmering in the gloom. He seemed small and altogether alone, grey and bent, like a wizened tree before the onset of a storm. From out of the shadow, a red sword leaped, flaming. It's no secret that Dungeons & Dragons takes inspiration from Lord of the Rings, arguably the most famous fantasy epic of all time, and nowhere is it more clear that this inspiration has influenced the game than in the creation of the Balor. Standing on average an eye-watering 32 feet tall, which is apparently 4 times the height of Andre the Giant for perspective, these Goliaths of demons are some of the most fearsome and brutal creatures to stride through the battlefields of the Blood War. A titanic image that is the direct homage to Tolkien's fearsome Balrogs, these cataclysmic beasts of shadow and flame whose malice claimed the life of Gandalf the Grey at the bridge of Khazad-dûm. Demons and devils are extraordinarily different creatures in Dungeons & Dragons despite their similar appearances and origins. Whereas devils are lawful, organized, and structured, demons are chaos incarnate. They are wrath, rage, destruction, and entropy. As such, they have no strict hierarchy, save for the general concept of the stronger demons, and the larger and more terrifying a demon may be, the more power it tends to wield over its brethren. But we are told in the Monster Manual that scholars of demons, known as demonologists, who dwell in our campaign worlds, broadly categorize demons based on their levels of power. These levels range from 1 to 6, and house lower strength demons like shadow demons or Vrox at level 1, and the more terrifying carnage-bringing demons at category 6. It's in this 6th category that Balors find themselves, and very comfortably at that. They are almost unmatched among demon kind in their skills for destruction, save for the demon princes and greater demons like Demogorgon or Yeenoghu, to name just 2. And while the concept of generals and armies are irrelevant, hierarchical concepts to demon kind, they certainly hold considerable sway over lesser demons due to pure brute strength in terms of both physical might and strength of will. These challenge rating 19 beasts have tough, chitinous, bony skin that grants them 19 natural armor class and a staggering 21 d12 plus 126 health. Their enormous wings allow them to fly 80 feet, but their enormous strides of their legs allow them to easily walk at 40 feet, so there's no outrunning a Balrog anyway. As with all of demonkind, they are resistant to non-magical damage, as well as cold or lightning damage. And flame and shadow is what makes these creatures up, so they are completely immune to fire damage, but also to poison damage, and the condition of being poisoned. These soul harvesters and body crushers have little time to deal with tricks and illusions, so their eyes burn through any deception with 120-foot true sight. They are also telepathic up to the same range, but can speak abyssal instead if they so choose. Traditionally, a creature with such brutal stature and propensity for such violence through physical might tends to be offset by having a weaker mind or being less strategically competent, especially something so chaotic. But the Balor seems to discernibly have no flaws in its stat sheet. It has 20 intelligence, 16 wisdom, 22 charisma, and its lowest stat is its 15 dexterity, presumably because of its massive size. Its tough and armoured skin grants it 22 constitution, but this creature is an apex combatant, using its brutal might and savagery to crush its foes to a fine pink mist, and therefore its highest stat is its strength, which stands at a staggering 26. This creature has no time for strategy despite its clear ability to perform such feats, and therefore is not, strangely, counted as a legendary creature. It doesn't care about what the most efficient way or the most cunning way to destroy an enemy is. It simply wants to reduce everything, buildings, creatures, anything around it, into a bloody mess. And this begins even before the creature has actually arrived. Flame and shadow engulfs this creature to such a staggering degree that it has what's known as a fire aura, which says that at the start of each of the Balor's turns, each creature within 5 feet of it instantly takes 3d6 fire damage, and flammable objects in the area will burn to dust. In addition, any creature that chooses to touch the Balor, or hits it with a melee attack within 5 feet of it, also takes this same 3d6 fire damage. Balors get to make 2 attacks in a multi-attack, and they do so with their 2 infamous weapons. They are perhaps most famous for their flaming whip, taken directly from the Balrog of Khazad-dûm, which has a reach of 30 feet and deals 2d6 plus 8 slashing damage and a further 3d6 fire damage to any creature that it hits. But it's primarily used as the opening attack in this multi-attack because it also draws creatures who fail a strength saving throw 25 feet towards the Balor, so there's no running away from this horrific monster. It will then make a longsword attack, a mighty, jagged, and cruel blade infused with electrical current. This longsword is so massive that it also has a 10-foot reach, and deals 3d8 plus 8 slashing damage and a further 3d8 lightning damage. Further to this though, if the Balor scores a critical hit with this, it rolls the damage die 3 times instead of twice. As an action, the Balor can also teleport, magically teleporting 120 feet to an unoccupied space that it can see, presumably as it dissolves into smoke and shadow. One of the most iconic and interesting things about the Balor is found in an ability called its Death Throes, wherein the Balor is such a compressed mass of blood-curdling rage and fire that if it dies, it actually explodes, causing each creature within 30 feet of it to make a dexterity saving throw. And if they fail, they take 20d6 fire damage. And we're told that the Balor's weapons are an energetic expression of itself. They are part of the Balor itself, so when this creature dies, its weapons are consumed and destroyed in this fire as well. Since their inaugural appearance in 1977's Monster Manual, the comparison has been drawn to the Balrogs of Tolkien's Middle-earth, and truly they do embody the characteristics of these malign entities, being massive, winged demons who wield flaming whips and swords. The name Balrog, in Sindarin, one of Tolkien's own languages, literally means demon of might, where the word Bal means power and Rog means demon. But the name Balor, used perhaps for legal separation in Wizards of the Coast, actually has its own origins, who may have helped to shape the general atmosphere of this creature in-game, and definitely helped to shape my illustration today. We're told that in the mythology and lore of the Forgotten Realms, that the species of Balors owe their collective name to one incredibly powerful, and possibly the original creature of their kind, known simply as Balor. And Balor in mythology is also the name of a giant and a terrible creature. The name Balor may actually come from ancient Celtic, Balors, which meant deadly one, which may have come from Old Irish, the word Baal, or the Welsh Bal. In Irish that would have meant to die, but in Welsh it meant not only death but also plague. Used as a name, it referred to Balor, or Balors in common Celtic, meaning the flashing one. The mythological Balor also had various titles, like Balor the Smiter, or Balor of the Piercing Eye. And that's because Balor, according to Irish mythology, was the leader of a set of creatures called the Fomorians, one-eyed giant super beings who actually feature in D&D, and will very likely be a Monster Monday of their very own one day soon, so I'll not say too much about them. But Balor himself, as their leader, was said to be able to destroy anything he looked upon. His single, giant, burning eye was linked to the scorching sun and obliterated everything in its path whenever he opened it. In a quote from Mark Scowcroft's 1995 book entitled Abstract Narrative in Ireland, we are told, and I quote, that Balor himself may have 1, 2, or 3 eyes, one of which is poisonous, incendiary, or otherwise malignant. He may have 2 eyes in front, 1 each in front and back, and an extra eye in the middle of his forehead. But the hero of whatever story that Balor seems to originate in tends to always poke this eye out, just like the Cyclops of Greek mythology. Some Irish legends talk of Balor having a glass of some kind, perhaps a telescope or a magnifying glass, through which Balor could look through and destroy people with his eye, not unlike sadistic children burning ants on a hot day. And maybe this could be a magic item that your group could find, a magic magnifying glass that can burn people to a crisp. But fire is not the only weapon that the D&D Balor has in its arsenal. I mentioned briefly that it has a lightning sword, very iconic of this creature, but it posed a bit of a mystery to me. Why would a creature inspired by flame and shadow, or a burning eye and brute strength, have a sword that deals explicitly lightning damage? I wondered perhaps if the crack of Tolkien's Balrog's whip was perhaps thunderous or cracked with lightning. I had some vague memory of watching Fantasia as a child, Disney's Fantasia, and seeing the scene with the terrifying demon, Chernabog, casting some kind of lightning, but having rewatched that entire scene in preparation for this video, I could find no strikes of lightning present. My thinking, therefore, is that this sword is purely to subvert the expectations of players who may be preparing in advance to fight a Balor. Its reputation is one of being a creature of flame and shadow. Its imagery is so iconic, so linked to Lord of the Rings, that a player might prepare with potions of fire resistance, coat themselves in fireproof armor, perhaps somehow manage to become immune to fire damage to deal with this creature's horrific attacks. But this creature's sword will subvert those expectations and leave a hole open in their vulnerabilities. Let me know if you know the reason, if there's some other reason that the Balor would have this famous lightning weapon alongside its fire. But either way, this makes for one absolutely terrifying demon, an agent of the greater demons, a creature capable of carving a warpath through your party and razing every city that it comes across to dust. So I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed researching and drawing it, and if you did, please make sure to help out the channel by leaving a little like down below, perhaps favoriting this video, and subscribing as well so you don't miss one, because that all helps to let YouTube know if I'm doing a good job here or not, and we could really use your help. Hopefully with your support, we can rise in the ranks from the status of a lowly Vrock all the way up to the mighty Balor itself. If you particularly love this drawing and you'd like a copy for yourself, I'll leave a link to my Patreon page down in my description box so you can support the channel in a more personal way, but you also get all sorts of perks like getting to vote on which ones of my Monster Mondays come out in what order, having your name added to the end of my credits, and things like one-on-one chats with me. So if you want to support us in a financial and personal way, then I'd really appreciate that, but I'm just glad you were here to face this Balor with me. So until next time, if your DM is dropping mad hints that you're supposed to be fighting some horrific fire demon, make sure to also stock up on potions of lightning resistance, because you never know what vicious tricks your DM has up their sleeves. It could be the Balor. And until next time, happy monster hunting.